too much.
All right, here are some injury updates in college football. We brought up, Craig did, Baron Morton, who missed the second half. I thought when he took a shot on the sideline, it wasn't a cheap shot. It wasn't a late hit, but I think he was on the ground and he got hit, and I thought maybe he could have suffered the possibility of a cracked rib or something like that. Here is the update. Don Williams from the Avalanche Journal in Lubbock. All the injuries in that list, Baron Morton, all of them now are game-time decisions. Morton, of course, came out. We mentioned Jake Strong quite a bit in that game. And what he came on, and they just kept firing away, had the long run. I'm not sure after the long run that he didn't just, like, lose all of his cardio. He had nothing left, but he did make some pretty poor decisions. You would think that a freshman quarterback is probably bound to do.
Yeah, I mean, he's a freshman that wasn't expecting to play. He's a third stringer, too, at that. Like, let's not forget they lost Tyler Shuck, and they're already down to QB2, and now it's QB3. So to go and face, of all teams, Kansas State, probably not the best first outing to be thrown into, but at the same time, like, that's why you have to stay ready, and that's why you're there. So yeah, I mean, he made some mistakes, but they obviously like his future. But with Baron Morton, I guess that's good news that he's going to be back so long as he's closer to 100%, and that shoulder's not going to be a nagging thing for him. But in the post game, Joey brought up like the injuries that they're facing, and they need to get to that bye week, but they've got another game first before they get to that at BYU. And I don't know how good BYU's record was good. I think they got a bit of a wake-up call this weekend, and I felt that was coming for them. I just didn't think that despite the record that they were as impressive as the record showed, if that makes sense. And so I'm very curious about this game. It's not a super late game. It's like a 6 o'clock kick in Provo, but that result's going to be really important for whoever wins that game, and whoever's on the losing end of that one, particularly Tech, I think would be in some trouble as far as the postseason goes. But yeah, that's going to be really interesting. Tech, they've got some questions, no doubt about it. And I don't blame, like you said a comment a few minutes ago, I don't blame that you hear the stuff that you hear and you're like, no, I don't buy that. And, like that's not good enough based on their performance we saw on Saturday. So yeah, they're in a unique spot, and how they handle Baron Morton will be really interesting.
Yeah, and I hope that they don't. Sometimes trotting out a guy there because you think he's better and toughing out the hurt actually hurts you because they're just not themselves. I think it's hurt Kansas State a little bit with Will Howard, and then you saw this week when they had Avery Johnson ready to go, it worked out for them. So yeah, I think sometimes you like the Willis Reed. Gut it out thing is kind of silly. It kind of goes against the nature of what you're doing, and you're happy to see a guy toughen it out, but if he's a shell of himself, then don't let him do that. So we'll see that, Tech needs, to stay healthy at quarterback for a full season, which they haven't clearly been able to do the last couple of years. And hopefully that means that they can do that with Baron Morton for the rest of this year, but who knows?
All right. Then there's the story that was brought up a little bit earlier, and now the story about Brock Bowers, the amazing tight end of the University of Georgia football team, two-time defending champions, had surgery earlier to stabilize an ankle. There were thoughts initially it was a high ankle sprain, but they're having to use, and they did the surgery. And I've seen reports from all of the national writers and those who cover Georgia that this is 4 to 6 weeks and probably out for the rest of the regular season. That, of course, can change. But what does this mean for Georgia? Besides the fact he might be the best tight end in America.
Well, I think that just based on what we've seen from Georgia this year, whenever they kind of get in a hole, Brock Bowers is the guy who breaks them out of it. And so my curiosity for them moving forward, depending on how long he's out, and he did have surgery on that high ankle sprain, and I think they probably expect him to be back at some point, but is if they do, in the latter part of their schedule, get in an actual game like they did early on with Auburn, which he bailed them out of, and against South Carolina, which he also had made some plays in. Who do they go to do that? Now, it's Georgia. They're not, walking out saying alms for the poor and please feed me, sir. But Brock Bowers is the kind of special dude that you don't just go, okay, your turn, other guy. It's a little bit different.
Yeah, I mean, he was far and away their leading receiver, and they've thrown for a lot of other yards, besides him. I saw a couple of tweets pointing out, well, they've thrown for like 1,700 yards without Brock, and that's still better than majority of the country, and that's all well and good, and that may in fact be true, but I don't think that there's so much number stuff in college football. Like everything's like numbers. And as a non-numbers guy, like sometimes I feel like you can like over number things sometimes. And I think that's the case of doing that. Like, yeah, they've got other great weapons, but like that dude was their safety valve, their security blanket, whatever you want to call it. And clearly one of the best players in the country. So I don't care how well you've recruited. I'm not saying that they automatically are going to lose a game, but to think that they're not going to, be hurt by this, I think would be foolish. So, yeah, this is going to sting. It stings just for college football that a great player like that's not going to be involved in potentially some of the biggest games down the stretch and potentially at all the rest of the way. So, yeah, that just stinks in general. But, yeah, they've got a lot of talent. It's just that there's that, again, that safety valve that you could always rely on that's no longer going to be there for Carson Beck and company. So how different that looks, I don't know, but it's definitely a blow. It's one that would debilitate other programs. And for Georgia, yeah, you might be talented enough to play around it, but it's still going to sting for the foreseeable future.
And one other injury update, a local note, Tanner Mordecai, the quarterback at Wisconsin, went out with a hand injury. He had a pin put in his hand. He's expected to be out for at least the immediate future. Not exactly sure what the timetable or timeline might be. It's unknown, according to Pete Thamel, and then other reports after that as well. And Wisconsin has lost their starting quarterback, Tanner Mordecai, for at least a few weeks.
He was playing okay. He wasn't lighting the world on fire up there at Madison, but I hate it for him because we obviously, like Tanner and know Tanner. But, yeah, got his hand dinged up. Iowa's defense, man, I sit here and poo-poo on Iowa and just how egregious their offensive play is. But you can't deny the results. And they're looking at, a one-loss regular season, maybe a two-loss regular season, the way things are going right now. And they're going to win 14-7 most weeks, or shoot, if they get to 14. But, yeah, that's a blow for Wisconsin. But I think that, Iowa was what impressed me in watching that game because Tanner definitely struggled like most teams do against that defense. And it's not pretty. It's not sexy at all, and it's definitely not what I would want to necessarily watch week in and week out for a majority of my life. But, hey, for Iowa fans, it's winning football, and it works more often than it doesn't, and it worked against Wisconsin as well. So, yeah, they're a tough out, and that's a tough break there for Wisconsin.
Somebody asked in the chat room real quickly about Walter Nolan. I have not seen any update on his injury. He went out during their game in the loss to Tennessee.
A ton of pain on the cart. CBS kept showing his face and how much pain he was in. So I'm hoping it was not as bad as it looked, especially based on his reaction. For Iowa, and for just to go back on Tanner a little quick there, they needed 10 more points to win that game, 16-15. I think that if he had played the whole game, they'd have a better shot at that. But that defense is just so unbelievably good. Still ridiculous offensive malpractice. They 37 yards passing and won that game. Wisconsin's, I'm sure their coaching staff is going, I know their defense is good, but it can't possibly be we can't score 16 points good.
Well, that's what people say every week, right?
But that's what we make fun of them offensively, Craig. You're right. But, my God, they win. They win games. It's not pretty, but they win. Yeah,
they're 6-1, and they're going to probably be favored in more of their games moving forward. I don't know if their schedule off the back of my hand, but Minnesota, Northwestern, Rutgers, Illinois, Nebraska.
Yeah,
5-0. Probably 5-0. Minnesota, yeah, give me that. Give me Northwestern. Give me Rutgers. Give me Illinois. Give me Nebraska. Give me them to beat all those teams. Maybe they trip up in Lincoln at the end of the year. Maybe somebody gets them before that. But yeah, They don't do it the sexy high-flying way like that Wisconsin eventually wants to be able to do it. And maybe you're right, Paul, but prior to getting hurt, he was 12 of 20, 106, no scores. Obviously would have had a lot more numbers, but who knows? Who's to say? He was getting a lot of pressure, and eventually that pressure got to him, and just the way his arm was going and the way the hit happened, it was just kind of a freaky deal that he got a break there. But, yeah, I hate that for Tanner. This is his last college football season. Finally, his last college football season, I think, right? There's no 7th-year parachute for COVID or something. I think this really is his last season, so I hate to see him not being able to play, to the best of his abilities.
All right, so